Welcome back to this, and I'm really trying to avoid using the word postmortem because there were some gains and there were places where victories were had. Although I understand somebody just pulled up with more ballots in Arizona, so we'll await that, and it'll all be better, I'm sure, once we get rid of the Electoral College and do ranked choice voting, won't it, boys and girls? Our election recap continues with the idea of eliminating the Electoral College, which, funny enough, the Democrats used to aplomb in 2020, but they still want to get rid of it. Michael Maibach, Save Our States, is on with us. Michael, welcome back to Freedom and Prosperity Radio. How are you doing today?
Well, fine. Good morning. Still supporting the Constitution and hoping that that some sensible assessments will be made about how we run elections. We've gone from election day, as you very well know, to election season. And I think for a lot of Americans, it feels like the whole system is being gamed rather than used as a form of self-government.
Well, I'm going to go back and just to be bipartisan for a moment. And I remember Karl Rove telling a conservative host, it may have been Hannity, that there were only about 5 counties that you needed to flip in order to win all the battleground states in a Republican presidential election. And he did the math. He showed it all. And that may have been right around or just after the 2000 election. And so, I don't blame Mark Zuckerberg and the Democrats for saying, gosh, we can do that too. So I want to start off there. And I'm not saying it is a flaw, but let's talk about how that impacts the Electoral College as the presidency goes, regardless of how much authority our constitutional monarchy should have at this moment. Democratically elected pen and a phone. Talk about that impact of how you can flip an election with just a small number of counties or cities where the turnout can be movable.
Well, the business I'm in, of course, is to defend the Electoral College design, which keeps sort of like the opposite of what happened on the Titanic, where the compartments weren't sealed, and therefore, when one was breached, then the next and the next and the next. When there are swing districts or problems with elections like we've seen in Nevada and Arizona this time, where it takes them days and days to get a result, the rest of the states have their results done because all 50 states had elections. People forget. And if this was a presidential year, we might be doing a presidential recount, but only in Nevada or Arizona or Georgia. And not in all 50 states. So the federal system, the state-by-state elections, is really one of the strengths of America. I'm not an expert on how you game certain counties in certain states, but
well, it's always been my counter to that argument. I just wanted to throw that out there because that is what the naysayers of the Electoral College say. Well, it brings everything down to a few key counties, but those counties move.
I see.
Those counties do move, and they change as demographics change.
Right. Well, and I like to say, if we had national popular vote instead of swing states, we'd have swing cities. So, can we bring up enough people in Houston and Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and San Diego, etc. So, and the national popular vote would only be about the population centers. One of the things I like to, when I give a speech on this, which I do around the country on the Electoral College, is to show a picture of New York City Central Park and ask the audience how many acres in Central Park. Nobody knows. It's 843. And I asked them, well, how many of those acres are farmed? And of course, everyone laughs because none. And if they were farmed, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Central Park would feed about 168 people a year. Now, there's 9 million people in New York, so I guess they depend on people in Wyoming and Nebraska and Iowa and et cetera for their food. And so the genius of the founders was at the Constitutional Conventions, 4 populous states and 9 much less populous states. For example, Virginia had 750,000 people and Georgia had 75,000, 1/10. And they made sure with the Electoral College system that less populated states, but the states important to feeding the nation and providing minerals for industry, et cetera, and all the different things we get from our states wouldn't just be controlled by, in the case of the founders, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and all of Virginia, which was the largest population state, which included West Virginia at the time.
Well, let me ask you this, Michael, because there are states, not a lot of them, but some of them that do apportioned districts. So let's say in Virginia in 2016, for example, President Trump carried 5 of the 11 congressional districts, and Hillary Clinton carried the 6, but she also carried the popular vote in the Commonwealth. Under some states, that would have equaled Hillary Clinton getting 8 votes and President Trump getting 5, rather than the winner-take-all 13. Is that a fix for some people's concerns about representation within states that often on a statewide level can be dominated by areas like Northern Virginia?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. As you know, Maine and Nebraska disaggregate their electors by congressional district, and then if you win statewide, you get the 2 votes representing your 2 Senate seats. In 2012, if all 50 states had used the congressional district system that Maine and Nebraska used, Mr. Romney would have been elected president. In 2016, there's 102 counties in Illinois. I happen to be a native of Illinois, so I know that. And of those 102 counties, Donald Trump won 90, Hillary Clinton won 12, but she won the state because it was the 12 Democratic area counties around Cook County, Chicago, et cetera. So disaggregating, when people feel like they're disenfranchised because of the winner take all, our answer at Save Our States is, well, every state can decide to disaggregate their electors by congressional district, and that might answer that. Most states, 48, don't do that because they want to do the winner take all and be more important and be a bigger factor in the plans of presidential candidates. But Maine and Nebraska do it so that presidential candidates will pay attention to it.
We're visiting with Michael Maibach from Save Our States, and I'm going to go into the weeds a little bit here because right after Queen Elizabeth passed away, Daniel Hannan, who I hold in high esteem and has been a guest on this program before and did great work in getting Britain out of the European Union to their economic success, still to this day the most powerful European currency out there, bouncing back. But he wrote a column saying that America should consider a constitutional monarchy like Great Britain has. And I thought about it, and I read it a couple of times because I hold him in high esteem. And I thought about it. I said, really, with the abdication of congressional oversight on so many things and the fact that they haven't passed a new budget since 2010, and they just do continuing resolutions and things like that, leaving this authority, as we saw rebuked in West Virginia versus EPA in the Supreme Court ruling, to these unelected bureaucracies under the dictate of the president. I would make the argument that we've had a presidential, if not popularly elected, constitutionally elected monarchy for the last 20 years or so, as Congress has just sort of shrugged off its oversight over the executive branch. And that causes this blood sport over the Electoral College that I don't think the presidency was supposed to engender, Michael. Does that make any sense to you at all?
Well, the anti-federalists had a number one fear, and that was that we might have another king in the presidency. And of course, The Anti-Federalists didn't win that debate. All 13 states ratified the Constitution. In Federalist 45, Madison assures people, the Federalist Papers were all about winning in New York. New York was on the bubble whether or not they would accept the Constitution. And he says in Federalist 45, that the federal government will look outward toward other nations, trade policy, the border, which we don't have anymore, and military, and the states will look inward toward the people and have plenary powers, whereas the powers of the federal government will be few and enumerated, Madison writes. But fast forward through the Civil War and the 14th Amendment and the progressives with their 17th Amendment and the income tax as well, and on and on. We now have really four branches of government. We have the presidency, the House, and the Senate is Congress, the second branch, should be the first branch, Article 1, and the Supreme Court, but we now have the administrative state. And we're seeing now, for example, the President of the United States has tried to forgive tuition loans, which were federalized under Mr. Obama. As you know, it used to be banks, private banks would make college loans, which is where I think they belong, but the federal government got into the loan business. And now a federal appellate court has said the president doesn't have power with the stroke of his pen to forgive hundreds of millions of dollars of debt. So that's just a reminder of what you're talking about. Now, when the Queen died recently, Queen Elizabeth, who seemed to be a highly dignified, dutiful person, more than one person remarked in conversations I was at, gee, it's too bad we don't have a queen. And my answer was, no, we have something better. We have a Constitution. And they don't have a Constitution in the United Kingdom. They talk about, they have sort of constitutional principles, but they have no document other than the Magna Carta 1215 to look at. What we have to do is live up to our Constitution and to protect it. And that's one of the things we're doing to save our states, is trying to defend the electoral college system, which really, if it goes away, the large cities will rule. 40 states will feel like they're serfs feeding the big cities, and we will not have a unity of a nation, I don't think. So we think the electoral college is a major significant part of the Constitution to defend.
Oh, it absolutely is. And for those in those big cities, if you're listening, don't chuckle about that idea, because it'll be to your peril, because the depravity and the decline in those cities will be immense. The economic downturn will make, the pestilence of Paris right before the French Revolution seem, like the golden age. It is a cycle that we've seen over and over again. So Michael, I have been approached by so many people. As a matter of fact, I think the last time I spoke to you, I had spent a weekend at a resort at the request of a bunch of Republicans who wanted to convince me that eliminating the Electoral College would be great for Republicans, to which I said, you misunderstand my program if you think I'm here to do things that are great for Republicans. But they were showing me all these places in California and Illinois that Republicans would win, but I've looked at your numbers and they're whistling past the graveyard.
Yeah, this is the National Popular Vote Compact retreats that they pay all expenses for people like you, but also state legislators all over the country to go on fancy retreats. They just invited a bunch of Maine legislators to go to South Florida sometime this winter for an all expense paid trip to talk about how the national popular vote would help America. And of course, for the county of Los Angeles has more people than 41 of our states. New York City has more people than 39 of our states. Nassau County, which is one of 3 counties on Long Island, has more people than 10 of our states, and on and on. And so people in Maine or most states, if they really think this will help them, because the Republicans or independents or whatever party they may belong to, it will really be ruled by the cities. And one of the beauties of America, people don't often think about this. If you think about the capitals in Europe or in Asia, they're the largest cities. So it's Rome, it's Madrid, it's London, it's Berlin. Those are the capitals, and those are the biggest cities. And in Asia, it's Tokyo and Japan and Beijing and China, the biggest cities. But if you look at America, for example, Illinois, it's Springfield, and in New York, it's not New York City, it's Albany, and it's Harrisburg in Pennsylvania, not Philadelphia or Pittsburgh, et cetera, et cetera. It's the way of America, by and large, is we don't want a large city to dominate a state by having it be our capital. And so it's Sacramento in California, not Los Angeles or the San Francisco Bay Area. So there is a wisdom in the founders and in all the people that started these states, that having just cities rule forgets about the rest of what you need to have a strong economy and to have a buy-in, frankly, a political buy-in of being in one union. This is what the Civil War was about, was keeping the Union together and ending slavery, obviously. It was done by a man from Southern Illinois, from Springfield, the state capital, Abraham Lincoln.
Well, and talk about the importance of making sure that this federalist system, gets back into its check and balance, because the more power winds up in the presidency through abdication of Congress, it was short of these court battles that you mentioned, Michael, which are expensive and infrequent. Maybe more so frequent as time goes on, but this isn't going to get better unless we start having congressional oversight and leadership in Congress that's going to start taking back the authority from the executive branch, which they just allow through these what you call the fourth branch of government.
Yeah, we now have more than a $4 trillion federal government, and we have 535 members of Congress who spend an awful lot of their time, of course, raising money for the next campaign, et cetera. We haven't had, as you point out, a actual budget that's 17 parts of it, because there are supposed to be 17 or 18 appropriation bills, but rather continuing resolutions. One of the Save Our States doesn't have a position on this, but I'll give you my personal view is I think the Congress, number one, has to return to regular order, which is to have budgets. Maybe what they do is on year one of the 2-year Congress, they do a budget, and then year two, they spend the whole year on oversight of that 2-year budget. Since we're going to have this continuing resolution, why not have a 2-year budget? The first year you pass it with all the appropriations and authorization. The second year, the committees become oversight committees of what they did the last year. That's one thought. The other one is to also, and this is complementary, to have a House and Senate committee whose only remit is to find parts of the federal government that can be closed.
Sure.
And we had base closing
commissions,
for the military, but why not have a committee which is the committee to phase out parts of the federal government? It's not a very apt title, but some sort of role where the chairman and the ranking member and their members on the committee have only one reason to exist, and that is to look at things that need to be phased out. But we really do just have, with a $4 trillion budget, we just have a government that is too large for anyone to oversee, and so it really is in charge of itself.
Right.
And we almost need a a set of revolutionary reforms. Why do we have an education and a housing department? The founders would have said, the housing and education issues really belong in the states. My gosh.
Sure. Even Hamilton would have said that. He might have sung it and danced it these days on Broadway, but he would have said it.
Just to give you a flavor of this, I'm told by educators in Virginia that the average school in Virginia, K through 12 school, whether it's private or public, has to fill out, and this is principals in the schools, at least 30 U.S. Department of Education forms per year.
Wow.
How many students do you have? What are their age, their race, the language they speak? And it just goes on and on, all these forms in order to assess if they're going to give them money and who's doing what and to have all kinds of data about these folks.
And we pay an awful lot of money for that clerical activity as well.
Right.
Michael Maibach is Save Our States. And again, people can visit him and please give because we need to save the federalism. Again, it's saveourstates.com. We so greatly appreciate your visit this week, Michael, and you keep fighting the good fight for us.
Well, thank you, sir. Thanks to your listeners.
And thank you for joining us again. Find out more about us at virginiainstitute.org. For all of us here, my name is Joe Thomas. Until next weekend, so long, and thanks for all the fish.